As we look ahead to a hectic couple of days, lots of interesting conversations. Let's start off with trade, though, because that is clearly going to be at the top of the agenda. Where do you stand in terms of how we manage these expectations? We had President Trump saying overnight, actually, the current situation when it comes to tariffs is a pretty beneficial one from the US.
Yeah, look, I think the G20 meeting between President Xi and President Trump is of course, hugely important because of the trade issues. But I think the real question here is what is the motivation behind President Trump's aggressive stance towards China? I mean, is it mostly about the trade issues? Is it about intellectual property rights? Is it about access to the Chinese market? Or is it much more a security issue and a geostrategic rivalry issue? I increasingly believe that it's the latter, and that will make a resolution of that conflict increasingly difficult. And that's going to have negative repercussions on everybody and on all the Asian, smaller, medium-sized Asian economies, the European economies, and so on.
So, Guntram, it sounds like you're in the camp to think that a large part of this, at least, is an ideological battle. And if you come from that point of view, it means that there really isn't a deliverable that can be taken away from this weekend, because these are things and ambitions that Xi Jinping is not likely to back away from.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So that is exactly the risk we are facing. I mean, suppose Xi Jinping was opening up the Chinese market further, was increasing access for US companies to China, was protecting intellectual property rights further. I mean, all the things that the reformists in China would like to see anyway. Suppose he was doing all of that. Would the US president be happy with it? And would the whole thing go away? And I think if you read, for example, the speech by Mike Pence, the vice president, or the security establishment, I think the answer is they would probably not be happy. So I think this is a conflict that might last actually for longer than we would like to. And that means we are in trouble. And it's not just the bilateral relation that will go sour, but it will have implications for everybody in Asia and in Europe.
Yeah, and if that tension continues to last, as you say it may, Guntram, there's risk on one side, but there's also opportunity on the other in terms of breaking the current US-China paradigm and China going elsewhere, namely Europe. Get us up to speed, really, on where we might already be seeing that happening in the EU.
Yeah, so China is in fact already reaching out very actively to the European Union. We've had a number of very high-level delegations coming to Brussels, coming to Berlin, and so on, really trying to reach out and saying, look, I mean, don't you agree with us that the US president's trade behavior is unacceptable? To which I guess most Europeans would say yes, it's not the right approach. And then, you know, basically they say, let's do something together, to which most Europeans will say, well, but, you know, we actually have a substantive problem with your corporate culture, with your state-owned enterprises, with also the involvement of the Chinese state in really buying strategic technologies abroad. So we do have our concerns as Europeans as well. And that makes it very difficult for Europe to basically embrace China. In the end, we are much aligned with the US on the substantive economic issues.
Mm-hmm. How much of an appetite or how much is the EU willing to accept China's overtures, I suppose, until there's some kind of pushback?
Yeah, I mean, what I'm telling also my Chinese interlocutors is that if China continues a relatively aggressive stance in terms of buying technology companies in Europe and doing that with generous state subsidies, there will very quickly be a political backlash. Because people see this and citizens, I mean, really start to ask questions. We are still far away from where we are in the US, where China is clearly among the general population identified as the global rival and the global enemy almost, I would say. This is not the atmosphere you have in Europe. In Europe, clearly there's still a positive view on China, but increasingly there's negative reports on, I don't know, when the robotic firm KUKA was bought. Of course, people were asking very tough questions, and these questions are increasing.
There is that kind of uncomfortable tension, right? And I'm wondering how it plays out at an event like the G20. What sort of allegiances, spoken or unspoken, come to the fore? Because as you point out, you may not agree with President Trump's methodology, but certainly a lot of these issues on immigration, on anti-globalization, on protectionism, you're seeing these themes play out in Europe, here in Australia, in the UK.
Yeah, no, I think indeed it is a strange G20 summit in the sense that we have a number of really new faces, also with Bolsonaro, the Brazilian right-wing leader, being perhaps not being himself there, but having his people there. So I think the atmosphere. Overall, I guess, is changing towards more less favorable on globalization. And I would say perhaps the bright spot is still that Theresa May is going to plea for a global Britain, is going to be open for trade. And the European Union as an institution will continue to support multilateral global trading system, rules-based global trade, the WTO. So I think at the end of the day, it's the UK, it's the European Union, and it's perhaps a number of Asian economies that will be continuing to support the multilateral system. But the two big guys, China and the US, will be looked upon with more suspicion than before.